Hi, everybody, and welcome to God's Views on Political News. We're back again in another week to bring you different topics. I tell you, Bill, there's a lot going on in this world, and it seems like it's not getting any easier.
I've noticed that the last 3, 4, 5 times we've gotten together, you said, "Boy, there's a lot going on." I mean, because there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. I know. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you wish there would just be a little bit quieter, that we would, for 1 week, we could go without very much going on, but that's not going to be the case. And it hasn't been for, I can't even remember how long ago, and I don't think it's ever going to be quiet again. Just my thought.
No, and then you throw into the mix that the president is this figure that seems to attract all kinds of accusations, and he has a way of making people mad. So you got to throw that into there. It's always some kind of uproar going on.
I know, and it's with the president. It's something where you're never going to make anybody happy. It seems, because one side really likes him, the other side really hates him, and never the two shall meet. And I think some of the things that he's doing, I think people have. Well, let's say, for example, today. Here's a very good example. DACA. That's been the big thing that everybody's been talking about on everybody's mind. What is the president going to do with DACA? And for those who don't know what DACA is, DACA are those people that came here, that were children that were brought here illegally by their parents who came into this country illegally. And back in 2012, President Obama passed an executive order which would allow the people that were here illegally, the DACA people, to stay here in the country for 2 years and give them a green card and let them work, and it would have to be renewed every 2 years. And what happened with that is that it was it was an unconstitutional executive order. One, because the president cannot make law, and Obama made law when he passed that executive order. And number two, it is something where he made law regarding immigration, which is absolutely up to Congress. The president wouldn't have the power to make laws regarding immigration, even if they wanted to and could. So it's unconstitutional all the way. And so today we had Attorney General Jeff Sessions came out and basically said, this is the decision that we've made with DACA, and we are rescinding DACA. And basically we're going to start now, but we're going to give it like a 6-month period. And it's been where President Trump is saying that 6-month period is to now allow Congress to do the job that Congress should have done back in 2012. Your thoughts about that?
Well, let's start with Obama. His law was lawless because, as you said, he didn't have the authority to create law. That's not given to the executive branch. I guess it's all water under the bridge now, but what is maddening is that Congress let him do this. Let him get away with doing that. So the controversy is focused on Trump and what he decided to do, and I commend the president. I commend Attorney General Sessions for sticking with the rule of law, and I hope that they will stick to their guns on this, because you cannot run a company, you cannot run a nation, you can't run a family based exclusively on emotion. There have to be boundaries. And things come up and you have to make decisions sometimes on a certain unique situation, but you cannot run anything based on emotions, because when you do, you will end up with chaos, anarchy, lawlessness. So anyway, again, for what it's worth, I commend the decision. Now it will be interesting to see how Congress responds and how committed they are to doing something on behalf of people who are not citizens, and then compare that to how committed they have been to do things on behalf of those who are.
Yeah. My guess is they're going to be very motivated to do something with the people who are here under DACA, more so than they are under the American citizens. And here's, a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up. Nancy Pelosi, and this is before Jeff Sessions came out with the decision today, but he said President Trump will be demonstrating political cowardice if he ends the DACA program. President Trump's decision to end DACA should break the hearts and offend the morals of all who believe in justice and human dignity. This cruel act of political cowardice deals a stunning blow to the bright young dreamers and to everyone who cherishes the American dream. I guess that's unless you're the Americans who are already here, right?
Well, how can I respond politely about Nancy Pelosi? She's one of those that, she only lies when her lips move, as far as I'm concerned. And, everything that comes out of her mouth is almost everything comes out of her mouth is, I would disagree with. And, she speaks of justice here. Well, justice is doing what is just. And what is just is what is according to what is written. And I think that the Justice Department has acted justly today. And it's maddening, that these people use that kind of terminology to talk about lawlessness and to advance. Let's face it, they want these people here to pad their political leverage. That's what it's really all about.
Yeah, they really want these people here to become legal citizens. They want to have them vote. And, a lot of people say, well, they can't vote. They're here illegally. They can't vote. But as we all know, in California, for example, when you sign up for a driver's license, you are issued, you are registered to vote automatically. And so people have said, well, why do you register people to vote if they can't vote? And they said, well, because somewhere in the future they may be able to. Which, of course, makes no sense and also leads to a lot of... Unless you have a plan. Yeah. And it leads to voter fraud, of course. Yeah. That's what happens.
Well, why not encourage these quote-unquote dreamers to, go back to your country, wherever it is, your family came from, as far as the whole argument, you're separating families, well, their parents should go back with them. If their parents came over and brought them here, the parents should go back with them. And they should go back to their countries. And if they want to come here, they should get in line and go through the process just like everyone else who's done it legally. That's my view. It's not about that we should be against immigration. It's just that we should be against doing it illegally. Because, you let one law lapse and you make decisions based on emotions for that situation. Well, you're going to start doing that for everything else. And then pretty much that's what we've been doing for a while now. Right. So anyway, we have hope that the current administration will bring us back to let's go by what the law says. And if you don't like the law, call your congressman.
Yeah, and I think, what we've seen really is that you get the left who always comes out and they're on the same page and it's almost like they issue a memo to each other saying, okay, so when you talk about this, you want to make sure you mention the word cowardice because this is what we want to portray the president as being. And we had New York Governor Andrew Cuomo who came out and said he would sue the president if he ends the Obama-era program that allows illegal immigrants who came with their children to stay, if he moves ahead with the cruel action. So there you go again, cruel type action. New York State will sue to protect the dreamers and the state's sovereign interest in the fair and equal application of the law. They said that would impact about 42,000 New York residents. And again, it's what you said, Bill. It's more of a concern about those that are here illegally than those that are here of American citizens that are under the Constitution and the laws of the Constitution. And the whole premise of on DACA was based on an unconstitutional act. I'm so glad the president came out and with one fell swoop can basically end all of it because that's what you do with laws they're illegal laws that were never constitutional, that never should have been done. You take a pen and you get rid of them. And, he's given them 6 months, which I wouldn't have done, but he did.
Well, perhaps that was wise in one sense, because of the political upheaval that he knew was sure to come. But what's going to be, I know what the Democrats are going to say and Hollywood's going to say. What I'm interested to see is what John McCain and Paul Ryan and Lindsey Graham, how they're going to act and how they're going to respond to this decision. I have a sneaking feeling I know how, but I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt and see how.
Well, believe it or not, I know this is going to come as a surprise, but Senator McCain, John McCain, and Jeff Flake have already spoken, and they are totally against what the Department of Justice did today. They feel that DACA should not end. Surprise, surprise. And also, Paul Ryan, who was saying, I think you should hold off and not do anything about DACA. He basically came out and said, okay, this gives the Congress time to do their job. So he didn't say anything disparaging against the president, which I was surprised about. And he's saying, Congress needs to act now. And I think everybody should realize, too, whether the president gave 6 months or not, it really didn't matter. The Congress does not need the president's permission to do anything.
Right.
They could have done this back in 2012.
Yeah, they just let a tyrant do whatever he wanted to do. That's what they did. So anyway, exactly did I say that?
No, not you. And they were in total agreement with it. And it's just like, again, look at it, healthcare. That was 7 years or whatever. Then that's still not worked on. It's still not passed. We've got tax reform coming up that it looks to be really, unlikely that the Democrats are going to want to go along with that. And so, some people are saying, are they really going to get anything done when it comes to DACA? And as I said at the beginning, I really think that they're going to try their best to do something. And if they have people like Flake and McCain who join in with them, they might get to the point they can push amnesty.
Well, it's somebody just put a word up there on the screen. They made a comment about procrastinate, Right. And I was just about to say, it seems that what Washington is best at these days is kicking the can down the road and down. And, I not want to get ahead of ourselves here, but isn't that why we're having to deal with a North Korean threat right now? Is because this is, eventually there are consequences for kicking the can down the road. There's consequences for not addressing issues lawfully and dealing with them wisely. So going back to DACA, look, it's true that, parents brought these kids over here. I think they're all grown now, right? They're 6 years old or something.
Most of them, yeah.
Talking about little toddlers or anything like that in most cases. Their parents did these things and the arguments be made, well, we shouldn't hold them responsible for what their parents did. Of course, the liberals hold every white person responsible for what happened 150 years ago during the Civil War,
Sure.
But that's another issue. I'm sorry, I said that. That slipped out. Let me bring a scriptural principle in here, though, to address the issue. God tells Israel, and I'm going to paraphrase it, be careful how you treat the stranger who's among you, because you were once strangers in Egypt. So he says, don't be unkind to them. Don't be, don't put them down. Don't treat them as garbage, I guess you'd say, because you were once slaves in Egypt. However, he also says this, one law for both the homeborn or the citizen and the stranger among you. In other words, that, we can be kind to those who are among us that are strangers, but at the same time, we expect the strangers to obey and abide by our laws. Mm-hmm. Can't have a lawless society. We can't make exceptions for the stranger that, and then expect the citizens to have to follow certain laws. That's not the way it's set up. And I say this because I've seen a lot of Democrats and liberals and progressives, all of a sudden, strangely, quoting scripture.
Yes.
I'm like, what? I thought you didn't like this. I thought that you were this was, not something you wanted to dabble in.
Yeah.
And yet now they're quoting scripture. Well, so they're quoting scriptures that, take it out of context, to further their agenda. But God makes it, we should be kind to strangers, but at the same time, we expect by our laws.
Yeah. And you get a lot of people who say, well, Jesus would not kick them out. Jesus would allow them to stay here. But Jesus was law abiding, and the way that I understand it. And I think Jesus would feed them. Jesus would be kind to them, but Jesus wouldn't allow them to continue to break the law. I mean, am I right or wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. He didn't break God's laws. In fact, and respected man's laws.
Right.
You remember the account where some people are going to try to trip him up, and so they bring him a coin that has an image of Caesar on it. And the whole idea was, in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, it says you shouldn't make any graven images. So anyway, they're trying to catch him in something.
Right.
So they bring it up there and they say, this has got the image of Caesar, and, who do we pay? Blah, blah. And he says, Caesar's. Caesar, that which pertains to Caesar. Render unto God that which pertains to God. So my point is, no, he didn't break God's laws, and he respected man's laws. He had respect to the laws of the land. So yeah, I've heard all of this baloney about, how he would be a socialist and he's for social justice. No, he's for biblical justice. He's for
right.
biblical truth. He's for what is right. This is kind of an apples and oranges scenario, but it's the poor. We want to do all these things for the poor. Okay, we should help the poor. We should be benevolent. We should take measures to try to help people who are less fortunate than us. But social justice wants to everyone else against their will to kind of make it a level playing field. But that's social justice. Everybody has the same or a fair share of the pie. Here's what Jesus said about the poor. You're always going to have them with you. You're always going to have poor people. So all of this baloney that, the Messiah would be a socialist, that he'd be all about this, that he would help the people who are in need. Yeah, he would help people who are in need, but he wouldn't do it by breaking laws. He would commend, he would provoke people, encourage people to obey the law.
And a lot of people are saying, well, what's going to happen? What would be the final outcome with these people? And one, amnesty or some sort of amnesty program, making them legal citizens is always possible for the Congress to come up with. Doesn't mean that the president has to, to sign it into law or anything else. He could veto something that they came across with. But a lot of people are saying they're not going to round up people. They're not going to round up the 800,000 DACA people and their parents, which is about like 12 million people. They're not going to round them up, and they're not going to deport them. If you haven't broken the law, then you're not really looking at being deported. So right now, as we speak, we have people out in front of Trump Towers who are protesting. And they don't even know why they're really protesting, because they're not going anywhere. These DACA people, at least for 6 months, aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere after 6 months either. They're really not going to round them up and send them out of here. They're going to probably get a law in their favor, which will help them either to have a long-term temporary work program or some type of green card and become legal residents, but not legal citizens. I mean, that's what people I think are kind of looking at is going to happen. In some ways, that doesn't sit well with other people, because like you said a while ago, there are people been in long lines waiting legally to become legal citizens. But I think that's where we're headed, Bill. I think that's the only solution outside of rounding people up and sending them out that they're going to get. And it would require Congress to actually have a law regarding DACA that they've never put in place before.
Well, It was, I guess, and I'm not a politician, and I don't think politically, but if I'm going to put a politician's hat on for just a moment, when Obama signed this order, or whatever you want to call it, and particularly those in the Republican Party, they had an easy out. They didn't have to take a stand on this. They just kind of let him do what he was going to do, and they put up some kind of verbal front. I'm against this, blah blah blah, just like with healthcare. But when it comes to actually making a decision, either they don't have the courage to do it, the will to do it, and so if Trump has done nothing else, he has flushed out a lot of these people in the Republican Conservative Party who really aren't conservative, who really don't intend to do the things they've told people they were going to do. And if that's one thing that has definitely happened since Trump became president.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's funny too when people say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go if he rescinds DACA, which he did today, we're going to sue him." So you're going to sue based on an unconstitutional law. How's that going to work? And I think a lawsuit was brought too when they had DACA, which was to try to legalize the parents that were here, and that didn't work. So you're just, I know children are given a little special, I don't know, pass maybe under the Constitution, but I can't see still, even with people who are here who are no longer children, how they could win in a lawsuit on DACA being rescinded.
Well, here's the issue for me. If you so desperately want to be here, why don't you want to be a citizen?
Yeah.
If are you here just to kind of feed off of the, trying to think the polite word. Are you here just right? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Are you here just for the benefit, but you don't want any of the responsibility? Is that what you're here for? Yeah. Because in my mind, that means you're an Esau. That you want the stuff, but you don't really want the responsibility that goes with it. And I have a fundamental problem with that, politically and spiritually speaking. So. That to me is the issue, and why our leaders don't frame this discussion in that way. I don't know, but anyway, let me summarize my views on this. I'm glad they did this. I hope they stick to their guns. I hope they see it through. We'll see what Congress does, and I hope that this establishes a trend in the Trump administration to, when these things arise, to make decisions that are based on what the law says. So,
yeah, Joseph said they might as well be suing the air if they try to sue under DACA. And Beth said Reagan gave amnesty in the same situation back in the 80s, and that was supposed to be the end, the last time for illegals to ever be given amnesty. And Congress agreed in that instance that thereafter immigrants would be removed who didn't immigrate legally. Once again, Congress corruption is blatantly showing. And absolutely, I think they really are going to try to give amnesty again. And I'll tell you something, although they have like a 6-month period, because, they're going to start, I don't know what they're going to start doing. What would the Trump administration do after that 6-month period? They're not going to deport people. So the Congress is going to get to 6 months and say, you know what, we need more time. We're working on this, but we need more time. And they're going to give themselves more time. They're going to go as long as they have to. And in the meantime, there's going to be more pressure on what are we going to do with these people in DACA.
Politicians.
I know. Yeah. I know.
By the way, that was my clause. I was not holding anything in my hand. Just anybody watching.
To be politically correct. He wasn't going to try to hurt anyone.
I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just, anyway.
But I do like this, and I think, with Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton came out with the RAISE Act, which looks at people and says, we want people that can stay and come here that have a skill, to give us and a certain education level. And if you look at it, most of these dreamers should be educated by now. They came here and they got an education from us. So that should be enough to probably give them at least a green card, legal resident status. And I don't know what goes from there. I don't know how, maybe from there you can start applying towards citizenship and working your way towards there. But I think one of the big problems, Bill, is I'm just going to take Mexico because I'm on the border here in California with Mexico. Mexico should treat their people better, and nobody's going to want to come here. Mexico should not take money from their people and put it in their own pockets and make sure that their own people, have what they have and be able to share in working there and getting what they're justly supposed to get. Not saying socialism, but I'm just saying, that their government there takes their money and they live in poverty, and that shouldn't be that way.
Well, I saw that Vicente Fox had gone off on Trump, about the prospects of, ending DACA, and about what bad a decision it was and this, that, and the other, how it was going to adversely affect America. And I was thinking, oh, well, gosh, maybe if you'd been this zealous to run your own country, then maybe all these people wouldn't feel the need to do this. Politics aside, here's what it boils down to for me. When I was a kid, teenager, and I'd go to shows, go see bands coming into play and stuff like that. And if it was really good, when people would get in line ahead of time to make sure they get a good ticket, and people who broke in line were not looked upon very favorably, and in fact, in some situations, we had a way of taking care of people who broke in line. But the guy who was in charge, if he was worth his salt, he would notice that there were people breaking in line, and he'd say, "No, you want a ticket? You go get back in the back of the line." Not saying you can't have a ticket. You can get a ticket. You just can't be breaking in front of everybody who's been waiting here patiently, obeying the rules. You can't break. It boils down to that Congress or several people in Congress are breaking in line, and all that does is foment resentment. It creates chaos, and you're probably right. They're probably going to find some way to give them amnesty, and it'll happen again in another 20, 30 years, Somebody needs to get a backbone.
Yeah, they do. And they're going to at least try to do that. And again, President is going to be looking at President Trump and seeing what he does. What is he going to do if that happens? What will he do? And I don't know. And President Reagan said it was the biggest mistake that he had made was to give people amnesty. Well,
and it's one of those, there was a few things that I did vehemently disagree with Reagan on, and that was one of them. But anyway. Yeah. Well, speaking of North Korea.
And the wonderful life there, yes.
No, I'm sorry. I was just.
Well, I mean, let's talk about North Korea, because there's a lot of things there that we need to look at. Over the weekend, I mean, we had the dictator there test what he says and what people kind of believe was a hydrogen bomb. It set off not good. And it set off a 6.3 on the Richter scale in North Korea. And, a lot of people are really worried about where this is going to go. And I think part of this, we have to give a special thank you to former President Clinton, who said this was a good thing, giving North Korea, all this stuff. And now we also need to thank President Obama for giving Iran this great nuclear deal that they had, where they got back all of their money so they could go out and help people like North Korea get the hydrogen bomb. Just saying.
I agree. I mean, Bill Clinton, what was it, 25 years ago? Is it been that long now? Something like that.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he paved the way for them to do this, and like North Korean communists were not going to develop weapons or nuclear. Ridiculous. So yeah, Clinton, Obama, and you know what? If I recall correctly, even during the Bush administration, there were certain concessions made, not on the level that Clinton did, but basically North Korea would start making a noise, and then we would give them certain concessions just to kind of quiet everything down. I don't know if it was Trump that said this or some administration, but what I heard them say was basically talk is over. Talking is not doing any good. It hasn't done any good. Did you hear anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard Nikki Haley, who's the ambassador, that came out and basically said, they're just asking for war over there and there's begging for war in North Korea. President Trump had come out and said that he was thinking about, trying to get the right words here, that he was going to kind of cut off trade or give some type of sanctions for the countries that also deal with North Korea. So he was kind of going after those other countries. China and Japan.
Speaking to China.
Yeah. He said considering cutting off trade with countries doing business with North Korea, and this warning came on the heels of what North Korea did. So, yeah, I mean, and there, of course, China's not happy with it, but as you recall, China's the one that said, look, America, if you attack North Korea, we're going to go in and we're going to be partnering up with North Korea and we're going to come after you. Now, if North Korea comes after you, then we're just going to be neutral. So thanks for your help, China. Not going to give any either way. But I think, we're at the point where we said, okay, well, North Korea can't do anything. It's going to be another year and a half before they do something. So let's just keep sanctioning them. But then here we go with the hydrogen bomb, which a few weeks ago we said they can't even do.
Well, if it was in fact a hydrogen bomb, then obviously North Korea is not intimidated by sanctions.
Yeah.
Who knows what the Chinese would do? You would think that it would be in their best interest to keep the markets that they have access to in the United States open. You would think that they would find that important. But who knows? I feel like the time has come that someone's going to have to do something, because you don't keep giving the bully your lunch money. He's never going to be satisfied. He's going to take your lunch money. He's going to take your milk money. And the more you give him, the more he'll want. Somebody's going to have to pop him in the nose. Now, I don't want to see war. I don't want to see that happen. But that's what it boils down to. Israel is a country that, regardless of what you think of their politics from time to time, and I don't agree with everything the state of Israel does or says, but one thing that Israel's pretty consistent about, when they see a threat arise, they know they can't really afford to play footsie with these people.
Yeah.
And so they have been pretty consistent about taking action when they need to take action. And so far what we have found is that those who are trying to bully them are all talk. There are a lot of words, but when it comes right down to it, they don't want to take on Israel by themselves. Now, applying that concept to this present situation, I would feel a lot better about it if our country were on their knees in humility and repentance before we tried to take something on like this. But nevertheless, sooner or later, if this guy's still in power, somebody's going to have to pop him in the nose. I don't think he's going to listen to talk.
No, because honestly, and I hate to use this word, but when he's crazy and irrational, there's no rational thought there to have a conversation with, so,
right.
And Joseph is asking, he says, is it possible that North Korea will be playing on the end times for World War III and killing a third of the world's population via nuclear bombs?
Is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible. If you're going to pin me to the mat, and I think this question might have something to do with what's mentioned in the book of Revelation about the great river Euphrates being dried up to make way for the kings of the East. I'm personally not of the opinion the kings of the East is referring to the North Koreans and the Chinese. I think it's referring to something else. And, I don't know if you want to get into all the scripture behind that. But, anything's possible. and North Korea and China certainly pose a threat if war breaks out. There's no doubt about that. I'm leaning toward thinking, though, that if someone would stand up to the North Koreans, and if need be, the Chinese, I think they will respect that. Are they willing to go to war over it? I don't know. That's the big question mark. But these are the kinds of people who are only going to respect action, firm action, somebody actually doing what they said they were going to do. And for so long, what have they seen coming from us? You make a fuss, we'll give you some money. You make a fuss, we'll do this. You make a fuss, we'll make these concessions. And what has that gotten us?
Well, and it's gotten us nowhere. And it's gotten us right here in this position that we're in and watching a country get stronger and stronger. Now, a lot of people have said, this guy's did this all the time. His father did it. His grandfather did it. They just saber rattling, and that's all they do. I don't know. I'm not so sure anymore that that's what we're seeing. I'm seeing a person that is continually going forward and taking bigger and bigger steps. I've heard that this, what they did over the weekend, if the hydrogen, thing that they have, the bomb, the tip on the missile, whatever, that the mountain around that area may collapse because of that 6.3 Richter scale. And they were saying that it could possibly be stronger than Hiroshima, and so when you're hearing things like that, there's nothing that you do with dropping a bomb, a hydrogen bomb, unless you really want to kill a lot of people.
Well, his father did it, and they've done this kind of thing before. That is true. But this guy, he kind of strikes me, even though I know he's not a teenager, but he strikes me as having the mentality of an impulsive teenager who acts before he thinks. It would be like giving a hammer, what do you call it, a jackhammer to a 2-year-old. You give a jackhammer to a 2-year-old, somebody's going to get hurt. And that's the scary part, the uncertainty of the mentality, the mind, and the state of mind of this person. And if they have set off a hydrogen bomb, if they've tested a hydrogen bomb, boy, that's not good, and something needs to be done. And or they may be the ones that are complicit in destroying a third of the world's population. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that a lot of people have said, if we do anything, if we go over there and we actually try to do something in North Korea, that they will kill many people in South Korea, sort of as retaliation, and they will immediately die. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. And other people have said, what he wants to do, one of the things that he wants to do, he wants to bring South Korea and North Korea together and conquer, if you will, the South Koreans. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into his mind and know what he's doing, but I know that General Mattis even came out over the weekend and said, we're not going to tolerate this type of thing. But where do we go? How far is too far? When do we say, okay, it looks like this guy is going to do this and we need to stop him before he does it? I'm concerned now that they were even testing a hydrogen bomb. For me, they've crossed the line for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously that's what he's going for.
Yeah.
Now, is he going to maybe use that as leverage to milk a little bit more out of the global community? Possibly. But it's kind of like Hitler. Hitler used the use of force or the threat of force to get what he wanted politically, But that didn't stop him from going to war. No. They didn't stop him from trying to conquer those that were weaker than him. I mean, we just in the last few days, we just marked the anniversary of the beginning of World War II when Germany invades Poland. Invaded Poland. He already. I'm sorry about the word just escaped me. He already went and deployed German troops in the Rhineland. He annexed Austria. He took part of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland. He was making all these threats, and he was milking stuff from the global community politically under the threat of, I'm going to get mad here and I'm going to use my weapons if you don't give me what I want. So, yeah, that probably is going on. But again, Hitler invaded Poland. Hitler
Right.
invaded Belgium and France and was threatening to invade Great Britain. People like this that have this mindset, and I believe it goes beyond just the mental part. It's a spiritual thing going on too.
Right.
And that spirit drives them to do these things. So eventually, if not today, somebody is going to have to stand up to this person. And boy, I probably shouldn't say this, but who's not to say the Chinese are saying publicly, if you attack the U.S., you're on your own. But behind the scenes, they're saying, hey, yeah, go ahead, push it, Who knows? So, but nonetheless, somebody's going to have to stand up and do something about it. I don't think the UN is the answer. But that being said, another thing comes to mind here. When Israel went to war, I'm talking about in the biblical day, their kings had at least the wisdom to go to God and say, what do I do? Do I go to war? Do I not go to war? And they heard from God before they pulled the trigger, so to speak. I hope President Trump will do that. And on that note, the fact that he called this past Sunday, called for a national day of prayer, regarding Harvey and the hurricane victims and all that. I'll say it again. I've never, from the beginning, I have not been, on the Trump train, as they say. But I have to tell you, watching the video of those people standing around him in the Oval Office, praying not to just any God, but to the one and only God, gave me hope that maybe, some people in high office respect that, he is the final authority. We need him right now.
We need it right now more than ever. And I think, it's been, I don't know how long since the National Day of Prayer was even put into law like that. I mean, it's been years and years and years ago. I don't remember the last president that ever did that. And I think it was good to see. It was great to see him going to Houston and going hands on, with those people. The mainstream media before said, he wasn't showing enough empathy. Well, of course, he didn't want to go and be in the middle of Houston and denying those people getting their food and supplies because he's there. He waited a reasonable time and he went back, and it was great to see those people gather around him. People who maybe probably didn't even vote for him have said, with him coming down there and talking to them and finding out like he's a genuine person, it changed their minds about him. And that's really good to see.
Yeah, I saw that. And, as far as the first trip and all the brouhaha about that and what Al Sharpton had to say and others like that, but whatever he does or doesn't do, they're going to find fault. They're going to fuss. They're going to complain about it. They're going to turn it into some political thing. I would think it is probably driving them insane that so many people in the Houston area, because Houston's a Democrat. Harris County is not Trump people. That was Clinton people. So to see these people responding seemingly very favorably to the president and his wife, I'm sure it's driving the Al Sharptons of the world up the wall. Yeah. I thought what he did, the way he handled it, I thought it was very presidential. I thought it was very appropriate. And I have friends down there, and I've spoken to a few of them. You know what? It's not so much they're looking for somebody to hug them as much as they're looking for somebody to just help them, kind of get squared away again. So, but I kind of got into the prayer thing in talking about North Korea, but now, talking about Harvey too, in my mind, the two are related. North Korea, Harvey, things that are going on right now related, because it's the fact that we're living in very troublous times. I believe that God is trying to speak to not just the United States, but the whole world through things that are going on. But because we are the world's superpower, and the world looks to the United States to set the standard. And I believe he's desperately trying to get through to this nation. And so you've got the threats of coming out of North Korea. You've got the Harveys, and now you've got Hurricane Irma coming up. I just feel like God's trying to get our attention with some of these things, and prayer and repentance is going to be the key.
Yeah, a lot of people look at what's happening and they say, well, it's God's way of punishing us. But I think there's another way to look at it, and it is to say just what you said. It's God's way of getting our attention, and God's way of getting our attention to know that we are dependent upon him. It's not a punishment as much as it is his way to bring us closer to him, have us turn to him in times of need, rather than to say, I can do it all myself. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And it's been, Bill, I know that you've watched like I have, and watching the rescuers down there, seeing people that it's so godly because they're the light in people's lives down there. They came there, they rescue people, seeing pastors walk around in waist deep water all day, rescuing people out of homes, people carrying people on their backs out of homes. And it was the godly thing to do. It represented God really, really well. And I imagine we're going to see the same thing in when Irma hits, which now is looking like it's a Category 5 and headed straight towards Florida. Well,
going back to the aftermath of Harvey, I was just sharing with the group this weekend, well, people have been saying this is judgment, God, this, that, and the other. I'm not going to dispute that maybe it is punishment or judgment, but what people need to be reminded of or need to know is judgment is not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what side of the law you happen to be. If you're on the wrong side of the law, it's not such a good thing. If you're on the right side of the law, it actually is a very good thing. And what I saw and what I have gleaned from the after is, it is to get us to refocus on what's really important. Everybody was focused on Charlottesville, on Berkeley, and all those things, and you and I talked about it. But when it comes right down to it, what's really important is your wife, your husband, your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, your friends, the people you work with, and the people that are just coming out of the woodwork down there in Southeast Texas, coming from Louisiana and probably every state in the union, going over there just to help people who are in need. On the government, they're not dependent on the government, going and doing the right thing, and that is an expression of one of the commands that the Messiah said is like unto the most important command. The most important is you love God with all your heart. But then the other one that is like unto it, you love your neighbor as yourself, and so this is an expression of that. And I was really struck by, there was a pastor, he was an Hispanic pastor, and he was probably a Pentecostal guy. I picked that up, coming from that background myself. But he had several of his congregants out there wading in the water, going to these people's houses, getting them, taking them to dry land. And, through the chaos, there were people who saw God working through others. And I think that perhaps there's an element that God's trying to get our attention. You're not doing right, but maybe it's also that God was trying to say through this is what my people need to be focused on. They need to be focused on helping others. So yeah, I see it a little differently than some people are trying to look at it right now.
Now, Liz said it is the month of repentance, Rosh Hashanah. So,
yeah, we're in the month called Elul on the Hebrew calendar, leading up to the day that in Judaism is called Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. The Bible calls it Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets. And so, yeah, fact, the night after the solar eclipse. And so in Judaism, it's believed that this is a time that we need to be earnest in turning our hearts back to God. And so I don't think it's an accident that these things are happening now. I don't think it was an accident that we had a solar eclipse. I don't think it's an accident that Harvey did what it did, when it did it. I don't think it's an accident that Irma Is that God's mad and he's wanting to destroy, or is it to get our attention because he wants to? There's a big difference, I think. So, anyway.
Yeah, and some people have said, that they think that it's because, like Jared Kushner is in Israel, that all of this started with the hurricane because Jared Kushner went over with his group of people to try to get a peace agreement signed. And then every time we go over to Israel to do that, God sends a message to the United States in some form or another, hurricane, earthquake, this, that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, I do believe there is some truth or some merit to the idea that if we are complicit in trying to force Israel into something that is not in God's will, then there can be repercussions. There is a history of things happening to us when we have, through our government, tried to coerce and manipulate Israel into an untenable position. Was this recent hurricane and his trip to Israel connected? Right now, I'm not going to commit myself to agreeing with that. I will wait and see what comes out of it. Right now, I'm going to give the Trump administration the benefit of the doubt when they say they support Israel. I haven't noticed or seen anything, at least that's blatant, that I could say they're not really being true to their word. Benefit of the doubt. So anyhow, at this point, I would say I don't see that connection. That's not to say that later on we find out something that, maybe there is some kind of connection. But right now I don't see it.
Also I wanted to talk a little bit too about, how the Bible talks about birth pangs and things like that. I mean, I've noticed lately there's a lot going on, and a lot that, Bill, I'm not sure why, but a lot's not being reported nationally about this. For example, there have been at least 100 earthquakes since Saturday in southeast Idaho.
That just amazes me.
And they're saying that they can't remember a time when that's ever happened. And I think the largest one there was like 5.3 over the last couple of days. And it's just been, little ones around. It's like a swarm, what they call a swarm of earthquakes. And so they're really shocked by it. And you can talk a little bit. You were talking about Santa Barbara. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, before we came on, we were just talking about how beautiful California is as far as the geography and the scenery. And Santa Barbara is one of my favorite places to visit when I'm in California. Well, anyway, apparently just in the last couple of days, Santa Barbara got hit with some freak out of nowhere storm that just did a lot of damage. And you Southern Californians aren't used to those. Earthquakes and fires, but if thunderstorms, you don't get too many of those, I don't think. But so there's a lot of things going on. You have fires on the West Coast. You've got this heat wave on the Pacific Northwest. Fires all in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, California, Los Angeles,
Utah. Yeah.
Right? Have these things happened before? Yeah, they've happened before. They've happened a lot before. Have we had earthquakes in different places? Yeah, we've had earthquakes in different places. It just seems that here recently we're having earthquakes in strange places, compared to what we're accustomed to. If we hear that there's a bunch of earthquakes in Southern California, over here in Tennessee, we're not going to think too much about it. If we hear there's been 100 earthquakes in southeastern Idaho since Saturday, well, you know what? That's strange. When there's a rash of earthquakes in Oklahoma, that's strange. And then you tie all that, or you look at all that in conjunction with Harvey, the threat of Irma, the solar eclipse, the threat from North Korea, and all these things that are going on, the internal strife, the charges of racism. You put it all together, it says to me, God's trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
In Luke chapter 21, this is in verse 25, it says this, that the Messiah said that you will see signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. All right, so you think about it. He says there are going to be signs up in the heavens. Solar eclipse. There's going to be a distress among the nations. The UN is meeting, an emergency meeting to discuss what's just happened in North Korea. That's distress. The sea and the waves roaring. I mean, need we say more? And someone else pointed this out, and I thought it was kind of interesting, that the solar eclipse took place on the 21st day of August, and Harvey came ashore on the 25th day of August. And what I just quoted you was from Luke chapter 21, verse 25. Interesting.
Wow. Yeah, very interesting.
So he's trying to get our attention. And what does he say? Is he saying, I'm getting ready to destroy you? I think he's saying, you're getting ready to destroy yourselves. And you need to turn back to me.
Yeah, and right before we went on today, everything had looked like it was going to be pretty good in Utah, that the fires were kind of getting under control. And right before we went on, about an hour ahead of time, there was three fires that destroyed, let me start again. A fire that destroyed three structures in Weber Canyon in Utah, and they're under order of evacuation. So things aren't over. They just keep coming, And for me, I know you and I kind of interpret things a little differently sometimes in the birth pangs and all that. To me, that says to me that God's return is imminent. That's what I see it as. I see it as God also saying, yes, you need to turn back to me and you need to humble yourself. But I also see it as a sign that God's return is very imminent. So how soon, I don't know.
Well, that's the question mark there. I believe that the Messiah is returning as well. And we have this concept. You mentioned the word birth pangs, the birth pangs of the Messiah. That's a biblical concept. And some people, use the word trials, tribulations, judgments, the day of the Lord. All of these things are the birth pangs. And what is the birth pang leading, or what are the birth pangs taking us to? Well, the Messiah's return, him establishing his kingdom, ruling from Jerusalem. So that's where everything's headed. But he also said in advance of that you and I, as his people, are to make the crooked, we are to prepare the way. So what if his people are too focused on everything except him? How does he get their attention? So I'm of the opinion that all the things that are going on, it's not so much God trying to get the attention of the world and, well, let me rephrase that, the secular world, because they're not really paying attention. They don't get it, right? I think he's trying to get the attention of his people so that we get refocused, because those people have no idea what's getting ready to happen, and they need to. Right? So
and
that's how I see it. Right. Yes. Yes. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think that, we are to wake up. We are going to have to help these people in times of need. We are the light. We are the ones that God is saying to the believers, I told you that I would give you signs of my return, which he is doing that and everything that we just described. And it will also help us to know, who to turn to. And Liz said, wow, God's speaking out loud, repent, come back to me. Absolutely. And I think that we're seeing that more and more and more each day. And that's not a bad thing, Bill, as we talked about. That's a good thing. It gets our attention, turns us back where our focus should be and should always be, regardless of politics, regardless of anything else that's going on. It should always be in God first.
And in that line, we need to be considerate and compassionate to those who are in the path of this other storm. It's on its way. People in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the Dominican Republic, and
everywhere around,
possibly Florida. We need to be praying that God will protect those people.
Absolutely. And I know we're out of time, and I wanted to say to everybody, thank you so much for being here. We really enjoy having you here. If you will, please share this with everybody to get the word out. And until next week, we will see you. God bless you. Take care. See you again next week.